Welcome to Chicos Podcast. I'm Efrain Prado Suarez. I'm a history major.
I'm Eric Vargas, and I'm a computer science major.
I'm Oscar Figueroa, and my major is ethnic studies.
I'm Andrew Garcia, and my major is mechanical engineer.
Today, we will go over race sexuality in the colonialism of the Spanish. We'll talk about the eroticism. We'll talk about race, memory, trauma, and we'll debate over like modern takes on this. Today, I'm gonna go over race. I'm gonna really go into what that is at the moment and why it's prevalent. So race, played a big role because of the caste system. Once the Spanish came into power through colonialism and taking power of the indigenous folk, they installed their beliefs in them. They installed their thought, the train of thought. They sort of brainwashed them into thinking everything that they thought was wrong and what the Spanish thought was right. You know, through the caste system, they put a whole bunch of races, like they put, obviously Spanish at the top and anyone darker at the bottom. You know, there's like even a famous painting, it's the Casta painting by Luis de Mena, uniquely unites an image of the Virgin, La Virgen de Guadalupe, and casta mixed race grouping along with scenes of everyday life in Mexico. But it shows you the hierarchy that was there. And even after we got independence, there are still people trying to keep us down. Like William Walker. William Walker, he was like full American, believed in manifest destiny, and at one point tried to invade Sonora, Mexico. He failed and was later trialed, but he was found not guilty by the United States. Later on, he met a powerful man who wants him to own parts of Nicaragua. And he does this. He goes to Nicaragua, he takes over Nicaragua, and he causes a whole bunch of trouble by reinstating racism and the whole caste system. Well, not the whole caste system, but by making slavery legal again. And that puts like a whole toll on the whole like Mexican like race as a whole. Like the Tex-Mex border, that was a big thing. The southern folk, they would come in and they would see Mexico as a way to escape, although like they would still find themselves in a similar situation. They weren't slaves anymore. They were just in a position of a lower like status of life. And this all goes back to like a lot of things and how this was all interpreted into like sexuality amongst other things.
And race was seen as a social status
Yes.
to people. So, whatever race you were, determined the status you got. The darker the less of a person they saw you as.
They saw it darker as ugly. They saw it light as like you had more power, that you were above everybody. You were above the anybody else that was darker, you were above them.
Okay.
And going back to the Mex-Tex border topic, looking at the article by Sean Kelly by Mexico in his head, slavery in the Texas-Mexico border. He talks about how in Texas the slaves were there. When they found out about the border movings, they tried to create different meanings for the border as it moved. In the first period, which lasted until approximately 1820, the geographic boundary between the United States and New Spain, soon to be Mexico, was undetermined. Because slavery was legal in both areas, slaves did not attach any particular significance to the border. The second period, approximately 1820 to 1829, but as yet only a faint connection between Mexico and the idea of freedom. The third period, 1829 to 1845, saw tensions escalate between Anglo-Texans and the Mexican government over a number of issues, including slavery, resulting in the establishment of an independent slave-holding republic and culminating in the annexation of Texas as a slave state, solidifying once and for all the linkage of Mexico with freedom.
And in the article, it has a code that says categories for mixtures. Like, for example, whites and Indians, they're known as mestizos, and whites and Africans are classified as mulattos, as well as an intermediate category. The mixture of mestizos and whites, three quarters white, are known as castizos. So if so if you're full on white, that means like you have more power, and then if found out you have a different another race, it shows that it means that you have less power back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, you could even look at it like the peninsulares, like the peninsulars, basically what it means, because they come from the Iberian Peninsula or whatever, which is the Spanish. Those are the people at the highest power, people who are born in Spain, come to Mexico. Compared, like, they have more power compared to those who are of Spanish blood, have both white parents, but they're born in Mexico. They were a whole category under in terms of power.
Going on to our next topic, which is the role of eroticism and sexuality within the history of colonialism and early Spanish and Mexican history. We look at Dona Encin, who was revered as our mother by the Nahu, the Nawa. She was seen as the goddesses of like all the other sexual goddesses. And the Christians, they weren't too fond of that. They saw her as, like as a witch, as a bruja. In Irene Laura's article, Goddess of the Americas in a Decolonial Imaginary Beyond the Virtuous Virgin and Pagan Buddha Dichotomy, she states how Dona Encin is among a group of indigenous goddesses who were demonized by Christianity. Anybody that believed in Christianity saw Dona Encin as a demon, as something that something that people shouldn't believe in, that it was wrong to believe in Dona Encin. And going now to the whole topic of the horror and virgin dichotomy. This horror and virgin dichotomy dates back to the 1530s, and women were seen as uptight if they weren't down to have sex with a man. And if a woman did have sex with a man, she was seen as a whore. And later on, that turned into if women were seen as pleasure toys for men. They were there to please the man, whatever he wanted, the women would do for him.
Like everything you're saying is like absolutely true. The goddesses were demonized by Christianity according to Lara, and Latuel, well, she was the unholiest of them all. She was labeled the filth goddess. According to Lara, she was labeled the filth goddess by the Spanish because she was the goddess of pleasure, and she was basically the fall of man. Like, she's sort of like the Eve of what the Christians believe, because she was tempted and she did it, but
she fell into temptation.
She fell into temptation, except it's completely different because she's just the goddess of pleasure and love, which is different.
And going back on Eric's saying, in the article it states that if a woman has sex before marriage, they're seen as a whore or like a pleasure toy. But once they get married, they're allowed to have sex, and it'll be a pure, since she's already married, so it'll be legal for her to have sex. Like, and again, before marriage, if they have sex, they're seen as unlawful witches or whores.
It's super interesting, because the priests were really intrigued by by all of this. They would basically go into like they would they would like get them to confess things like, oh, which hole did you put it in? Talking about anal sex and how that was unholy. They'd be like, what positions would he do? They were so curious.
So you're telling me that the priests were a bunch of weirdos back then?
They were on that weirdo, like they were just like, oh, tell me what positions you do. Oh, that's wrong, and that's where we get missionary sex from. Like the name missionary comes because of the Spanish missionaries, you know, but like because any other form of sex was looked at as animalistic and improper.
And the priest would ask those type of questions to make people feel guilt. They wanted them to feel as much guilt as they could so they can stay pure to the belief of Christianity. They didn't want them going back to their old beliefs, being able to have sex as just pleasure. Instead, they wanted them to get married first before they can have sex, to reproduce and not just go around having sex to please themselves.
You're absolutely right. Like the women were no longer, not I'm not saying that they had more power, but they had more power back then, because if a Nahuatl woman wasn't getting pleased by her man, she could leave at any point. But if you look at it now, once you're married, it's a sin to get unmarried. You're not supposed to get unmarried because once you marry someone, you're in it for life. But that's completely different from what the natives believed.
And the third topic we'll be talking about is historical trauma, which has happened throughout the years. And in the article, Moquis Castellium and the Trauma of History, Hopi Oral Traditions of 17th Century Franciscan Missionary Abuses by Thomas E. Sheardon and Stuart B. defines as historical trauma as cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over the lifespan and across generations, emanating from massive group trauma experiences. And all those experiences get passed down because
they all the everything gets passed down because once you like teach a whole group of people something, they all begin to show it to their generation.
Yeah, a lot of the historical trauma was caused from fear that the Spanish put into people after forcing them to change their beliefs and thinking that their way of living before they came was wrong. Many of them feared to believe what they used to believe because they would get threatened, they would get killed, they would be forced to change their beliefs and their way of living. If not, they would get kicked out, killed, or abused. They get punished, they'd get abused in many different ways.
Psychologically and physically.
Which caused lots of fear, making them have trauma throughout the years since future generations weren't allowed to have the beliefs their parents used to have. And in the film I Dream in Another Language, it is shown since Don Evaristo had feelings for his friend Don Isaurio, but Don Evaristo had feelings for Don Isaurio, but he got caught being intimate with him by the girl they both liked. And since she saw them, she ran away. She didn't run away. She avoided Don Evaristo. She didn't want to talk to him. But he went to her, begged her to marry him, claiming that Don Isaurio was the one that forced himself upon him, and he didn't want to do it. And she believed him, so she married him. But the reason Don Evaristo wanted to marry her was so people wouldn't find out. He begged her not to tell anyone and to marry him. He didn't want anyone to find out since they were being taught Christianity, and it was a sin to have any type of emotion towards the same gender.
He,
And having done what he did, it'd be a sin. And after he got married for years, he lived sad, depressed, and he even got in a fight with Donisario before they stopped completely talking to each other.
And in the film, when when Donisario found out that Evaristo really liked the girl that they both liked, they both got into a huge argument at the beach when they both had flashbacks and they were fighting each other. There was blood everywhere, and Don Evaristo had a knife and was about ready to kill Donisario, but he was hesitating for like 10 seconds and pulled the knife away, and he just left him there bleeding. He still survived, and they haven't talked to each other for over 50 years.
He was filled with anger and rage since he couldn't actually be with him and didn't want to be near him since every time he got near him, he felt guilt going back to the day he got caught with having an intimate moment by her, which caused a trauma. So for all those years, every time he saw him, he'd have a flashback to that moment, which is the trauma that got caused.
And you could see the trauma throughout the movie. You know, him not really like the way he treats his own granddaughter. You could look at that and say, well, he's treating her because of anger, you know, his trauma with women. Or you could even like look at the trauma after he became friends again with Donisauro, and they're going to the beach again, you know, they're remembering of old times, having fun, but he touches him. You know, Donisauro grabs his shoulder and he was like he freaks, you know, he freaks out. He pushes him and, you know, he's about to hit him with the chair. Obviously he doesn't. And they struggled through a lot of this, you know. And this is the trauma that Christianity, that the Spanish white man brought upon the indigenous folk.
That touch brought back all those feelings he had that day when he got in a fight, caused him to get mad and act out upon him again.
Yeah, and Evaristo way overstepped the line. What Evaristo did after a second fight, he grabbed a gas can and went to Donisario's house and actually like locked him inside his house, locked all the windows, locked all the doors, sealed shut, and he poured gas all over the perimeter of his house and lit it on fire until his granddaughter opened the door and freed Donisario, and Donisario was saved. But it proves how anger and how trauma Don Rivisto had by actually trying to kill his friend. So he was dealt with a lot of trauma, and Don Rivisto figured that since Isario was the problem, he might as well just kill him. But thankfully, in the movie, his granddaughter freed Osario, and Evaristo just went home like nothing happened.
And before all that happened, before the Spanish came and forced them to change their beliefs, it was gender fluid, which is why he didn't feel anything was wrong with it before he got caught.
And the next topic I'm gonna talk about is how is it like relevant for today. Throughout years, history is like one very important subject that has to be taught and be taken seriously. Even though it happened in the past, we still learn from it. Like throughout history, like I'm gonna talk about I'm gonna talk about sexuality. Many people believe that since homosexuality is a crime, they might they will be seen as less of a people. If two of the same sex were seen together, holding hands or kissing, they might seem less of a person. Many people believe that God created a man and woman in order to have a family and produce offspring. Many people believe that God did not create two homosexual people in order to make a kid because that's not how it works. So many people despise gays and lesbians, and they just talk smack about them, and Yeah, even assault him, which is sad.
Yeah, and history is also still really relevant to today because history is what made today how it is. So what happened in the past is what changed the ways and made society today, their beliefs and ways of living.
And
Keep going.
and yeah, throughout history, many things happened. Like back in the day, many people see the Virgin of Guadalupe as a goddess, even though it was a long time ago. It's still relevant to today. Like for example, I have this one friend. His name is Daniel. He paid around $500 to have a large tattoo of the Virgin of Guadalupe on his arm, and he treasured it. He says he's gonna treasure it forever. And I asked him, oh, why did he get it? He's like, oh, that his father influenced him. That the Virgin Guadalupe is the goddess and the purest woman in history. So my friend, my friend took it up, followed his dad's footsteps, and got a tattoo of the Virgin Guadalupe, all black and white, and it was absolutely beautiful. The Virgin Guadalupe is seen as a very, very important symbol to the Spanish people. Many people get tattoos. Many people have posters. Some people even have stickers on their cars to show that they support the Virgin of Guadalupe. Every time I go to Mexico, I always visit both my parents' side in Guerrero, and I have this one aunt. Her name is Tia Beatriz. At her house, she has a room about 10 by 12 feet, and she has posters and a statue of the Virgin Guadalupe. And I asked my aunt, "Oh, why does she have all this?" And she's like, "Oh, that she's like the purest woman in history, and the Virgin is what helps people be good." And yeah, she had the entire room is filled with posters. Everything is clean. Everybody has to take their shoes off. And one rule that my aunt said in the room is no cursing.
Yeah, and those beliefs were put in people's minds when the Spanish invaded. They forced many people to change their beliefs to Christianity.
And like you said, if they didn't switch over, they were punished. They were tortured. So they were pretty much forced to switch over into believing what they didn't want to believe.
Yeah, and the Spanish forced the Spanish forced other people to convert to Christianity because if the Islamic people did not convert to Christianity, they either had to be forced out of Spain or they would be killed. About 50% of them did move out, and another 50% converted to Christianity, but like in secretly, they still respect their Islamic culture.
No, like the whole Virgin Mary thing, that's just a bunch of fanaticism, that people just they over they fanaticize. Well, they just
Yeah.
fanaticize something that, you know, was really isn't the original story of who she is, the original story of, who the Virgin Mary is, who Nuestra Gran Señora is actually Donatzin.
Many people don't know that because they were raised believing in the Virgin Mary. They don't know the history about why. They know that that's the right way,
And
but they don't know that the past generations might have believed something completely different, but they were forced to change, which is why now that's what they believe.
And in all Latin America, everything we just said is still prevalent to this day. You could look at it from race. You could say that, para mejorar la raza, which means, basically get with someone with more Caucasian features, because you're going to better the race by, quote unquote, getting the good features of the white man. But why is that? That's a brainwashed mentality of the Spanish. And you could also look at like race. No, not race. I mean, gender and like gender fluidity. Where back then they didn't look at it as, I wanna, it's just me and you, me and Eve. Like back then it was just, man, I like what I like.
They didn't see no problem with liking, if you like the guy, you like the guy, they were fine with that. If you like the girl,
If you like both,
whatever floated your boat, they were fine with.
there's a saying, that many Catholic followers or Christian followers say, that my friend over here, he told me about.
As Oscar was saying, God made Adam and Eve, it's not Adam and Steve.
And that was like a big point that they make, that, it's not Adam and Steve, but Adam and Eve. And that all is just, nonsense that they try to put out there so they could be, just, man and woman. But it's all about truly what it is. Like, it's like it's holding back what we could be as like people.
And race is still seen as a social status in today's society. White is still seen as superior. There's still people that think white is superior above any other race, and other races are put down. Especially the darker they are, the
less power they
the
may
less
seem
power
to have.
they have, the less power they're given. There's still injustice towards the darker skinned people.
And including names as well. Like for example, if a Hispanic named Jose or a white man named Michael, they both apply to a job interview and they both have the exact same qualifications.
Man, Michael will get chosen more often.
Yes, because many people believe that sadly racism is still affected today, and they're gonna choose Michael because
he's white.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like a white name.
Yeah.
But let's say it's Michael. Michael's actually like Hispanic or black or anything, But because he has the name Michael,
he gets chosen.
It's messed up, if you really think about it, because you're missing out on opportunities that you could have had, but you don't have anymore because just of the name given to you, like just culturally, Like if you were to give your kid's name as, let's say, Cuauhtemoc, that fool's not getting the job.
That is true.
Cuauhtemoc isn't getting the job. Like, but Charlie?
Charlie?
Charlie.
Go ahead.
Or John,
You're
or
hired.
John? Oh, Jonathan? I like
Congrats,
sound
John.
right.
You're hired.
Congrats,
You start tomorrow.
And it's also shown when a crime is committed within two different races. One can be black, Hispanic, any other race other than white, and someone white. They can commit the same crime, but if they're not white, they're more likely to be pronounced guilty than the white person.
Or in general, just get a larger sentence. You could look at it as just a lot of things. You could even look at the military. The military only goes to impoverished communities because rich white people, they're not going to join the military, or they don't advertise it to them, but that's because they only see us as a way out. The military isn't for us, if you really think about it. They're just trying to use us. To really wrap things up, we went over sexuality, race, eroticism, and how this trauma all is still relevant till today in society. If I were to leave you guys today with one question is, or one answer is, we are the difference. We are the people who are gonna inform our kids about this information. And that's gonna spark the whole generation that's yet to come on knowledge that our prior ancestors don't have. So this has been the Chico Podcast. I'm Efren.
I'm Eric.
I'm Oscar.
I'm Andrew.
Chico Podcast out.